All right, I think we're all set, Dr. Lallman. We've got our transcript rolling, and so I want to welcome everybody to our Thursday Rancher series. And of course, we're still talking about wintering cows and no rain and what are our options here this afternoon in this series. And so with that, we've got a little bit of representation from both sides of the state if we want to divide it by I-35. And with that, I think we'll get started because we have some good information. I'm Dr. Rosalind Biggs. I am a beef cattle extension specialist stationed kind of here at the veterinary school in Stillwater. Dr. Lallman and Dr. Beck, I'll let you do some brief introductions there, and then we'll get into the important stuff.
Thank you, Dr. Biggs. Dave Lallman, extension beef cattle specialist here in Animal and Food Sciences. Appreciate everyone joining us. Had a great turnout a couple of weeks ago. Looking forward to a really good, looks like a lot of people jumping on here today. I forgot 2 weeks ago to remind everyone in this series, if you would please take a moment to fill out the survey. When you exit, it should pop up on your screen automatically. And I know it'll take just a couple of 2 or 3 minutes for you to fill that out. Very helpful information for us going forward. Thanks and welcome.
I'm Paul Deck. I'm a beef extension specialist here at the state office in Stillwater as well. Really proud of this set of seminars and webinars we have, because it's going across the state, and this is really kind of what we're all about, and very proud to have our area specialists and producers helping us present these topics.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Dr. Lallman and Dr. Beck. Brian Freking is up first, as well as Harold Stephens, and I'll let you all do all the way from Atoka County today. I got that right. And so with that, Brian, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, let you do some introductions, and then we'll pull up the slides for the presentation.
All right. Well, thank you, Rosalind and Dr. Lallman and Paul. We appreciate being on here. My name is Brian Freking. I'm an area livestock specialist east of I-35 and south of I-40. So I get that corner of the state. Harold Stephens is with me today, and he's going to represent kind of our county educator in that district area and kind of go through some experiences that he's had throughout his career. He's kind of made me welcome today by looking at his background of having a bunch of snow, and me coming from South Dakota makes me feel right at home today, I guess. So Harold, if you would kind of give us a little background on yourself, and then kind of we'll get started with our topic today.
All right, I'm Harold Stephens. I'm the extension educator for agriculture and 4-H in Atoka County. I've been in this position for 22 years. Prior to that, I was an ag teacher for about 7. And prior to that, I spent my time managing a couple of ranches. So we've been there and done that. And now we're in the extension world and kind of closing in on the end of this deal also. So anyway, that's kind of the background on me, Brian.
All right. Well, thank you, Harold. We've shared some time together. We've had to go through some drought periods in 11 and 12, and now this year. And so I kind of want to open that door to talk about maybe some experiences that you might have had that you can kind of share some of your expertise with. So I think you've got kind of a PowerPoint presentation pulled up, and go ahead and start sharing that if you want. He made me feel really good. He narrowed my picture really down to make me look skinny on here. So that's a good job on that first slide for Harold. So Harold, go ahead and. All
right. So Brian, what we've got here, Atoka County, we're in a drought just like everybody else in the state and the surrounding states. And I've been asked several times about, what's the biggest obstacle you have there in Atoka County at this point. And I would say probably the biggest obstacle we have is every producer we have, just like everybody across the state, is short of hay, doesn't have enough hay. As I talk to my guys in the county, I get reports from them as how much hay do you have? Some of them, you know, I've been told, hey, I've got just as much hay as I ever have when I start the winter, but I had to start feeding it earlier. Others have got 50% as much as I need, or all the way down to 10% of what they need, what they normally have or use. So obviously, none of these guys can feed as normal. They're going to have to reduce the amount of hay that they feed, or limit that hay some way that they can do that to get through. You know, when they do that, obviously they're going to have to feed more feed if we're not feeding as much hay. So the question is, you know, how do we limit that feed? How can that be done? And Brian and I talked this morning that, you know, we as extension educators, area specialists, state specialists, we'll come up with these recommendations, things, you know, for them to do, and they're things that will work. The obstacle there lies in how do we implement those recommendations out there in the real world? It's easy for us to sit in our offices and make these recommendations, but actually making them work out there kind of becomes an obstacle sometimes. And limit feeding hay is obviously one of those. So I guess the big question is how do we do that, or what do we got to deal with on limit feeding hay? You know, it's best to feed some of that every day if we can, along with that concentrate feed. But it's only practical in certain situations. You know, square bales, obviously, that's an easy way. Okay, we've got a grinder. We can unroll that hay, or we can do a limited or timed access to that hay. So talk about square bales just a little bit. I'm old enough that I remember that's the days that's the only hay we had. 50 years ago, everyone fed small squares. And when we're talking about feeding those small squares, we kind of got to go back and think that we all limit fed hay every day back in those days. We never hauled enough of those little squares out to give them all they wanted. So we were always limiting that hay to do that. And it was really easy to do. Maybe we was, okay, a bale to X number of cows, or a small situation, you know, we're going to give each cow X number of flakes or something like that. And it was pretty easy to limit that stuff. You know, the big squares that we have today in some places, we don't have many of those in southeast Oklahoma, but we can do the same thing. We can flake that stuff off as far as feeding it to those cows. Those flakes weigh quite a bit more than those small squares do, but anyway, that it can be done. It's pretty easy, pretty simple to do. However, my people down here don't have either one of those hardly. The only big squares we have is what's been hauled in from somewhere else. I don't believe we have not one single big square baler. We still got a few small square balers, but not just a whole lot of them. So anyway, after that deal, along came the round bale, the invention of that round baler. And I, you know, love them or hate them. It's been said by many people that that's the worst thing that ever happened to the cattle business in southeast Oklahoma, because we started putting that hay out. We kept it out there all the time, basically made welfare recipients out of those cows. And limiting that hay is tough to do. I mean, you see producers that'll go out, maybe they work a job in town, and they go out on Saturday when they're off, and they put out enough hay to last all week. And that's out there. We can't do that. So there's some obstacles on limiting your consumption of those round bales. How do we do that? This is an obvious, easy way. A hay grinder, a vertical mixer, maybe a bale processor with those things equipped with scales. I don't have very many of these in my county. Matter of fact, I can probably count them on my fingers how many of these pieces of equipment we have here. And you got to be a pretty big producer to make these deals work. Most of my producers here probably have 40 or 50 cows or less in my county. So that kind of takes that out of the equation on what we can do. a lot of people down here unroll these bales. Okay, they say, well, we'll go out there and we'll just unroll half a bale or whatever that might be. But when we go to talking about these unrolling these bales, there's some obstacles to that deal. Problems with that deal is guessing the weight of half a bale. That can be very deceiving. Unrolling those bales. They never unroll even. I've never understood why it's not possible for those things to unroll the same way they went in there. We had those nice even windrows when we put them up, but when we go to unrolling them, it don't ever work that way. We'll get nothing coming off, or we'll get a clump here or a clump there. It never looks like the pictures that you see people unrolling those things. But back to the weight on how that can be deceiving. Brian, that deal you sent me didn't come out right. But anyway, we've got a picture here. Let's just say that this 66-inch bale, 5.5 foot diameter bale, weighs 1,000 pounds. How much of that can we unroll? Let's say we want to unroll 300 pounds. We've got 30 cows. We want to feed them 10 pounds. We want to unroll 300 pounds. Well, we're going to get that in 6 inches. And people don't realize that there's that much weight on the outside of that bale. So even if we could make it unroll evenly, this becomes an obstacle. If we're really trying to limit this thing and figure out exactly how much they need. You look right here on the first 12 inches on that bale, you're talking about 600 pounds of that bale, 60% of that bale in the first 12 inches. So that gets a little bit tough to do, and getting it spread out where those cows can do it. A solution to that, and I've got a producer here in my county that is doing this way. He's unrolling his bales, but he's matching his herd size to the weight of that bale. He's got multiple pastures, and he will put the correct number of cows in that pasture so he could get the consumption that he would like to have through that bale. So I thought that was a pretty neat deal. He said sometimes he has to do a half a bale, but he kind of got the weight figured on that after he looked at that chart and saw the percentages of those weights. All right, so this is the next one, probably the most practical one for my small producers in my county to use, and that would be a timed or limited access to these bales. When we do this, obviously our hay feeding area, it's got to be separate from where we keep these cows. When we let them into that deal, we've got to have room for all these cows to eat at one time. Sometimes it might be hard to get them away from that hay when they've been in there long enough and your time's up, and we got to get them away. It might be a little bit tough. Looks like a good place to train a good cow dog there to me, but and then once we get them off the hay and we're going to feed them the concentrates or the real nutrients that's going to keep them going, that's got to be in a separate pen from where we've turned them in to have hay. I've got some personal experience with this deal right here, and it goes back to the drought of 2011. And I had a small set of cows here in the county, and it was a pretty rough year. That was the same year that we had the tornado hit Atoka down here and hit my house and took out my barn and things like that, So it was a pretty rough year, but that drought came along after that tornado, and gosh, I didn't have any hay. I couldn't find any hay, anything like that. So we had to kind of start doing some digging and figuring out how in the world we're going to hang on to these things, Didn't want to just get rid of them and sell them, even though I was a small producer. Had some genetics that I wanted to hang on to and those type of things. So, I did enough research, talking to enough guys. I remember talking to Dave back in 2011 about this deal, and this is something Dave's going to talk about next week, I believe, where we were going to cut these cows down and only let them have like just enough forage that they needed to keep them going. So we figured all that out, deal, and I did a lot of checking around and how long have I got to do that and all that kind of stuff. We come up with these estimates right here on what a cow will eat when we turn her in there. And that 45 minutes was about 6 to 10 pounds. As you go up, consumption also goes up, but notice it goes up slower as you go through there. So I've had some other guys around here that they watch me, they've listened to me when I did that, and they're doing some of this year. I've got guys that, okay, I want my cows to eat 15 pounds, so they're letting them in there about 3 hours every day. And then we've got some that just don't have enough hay, and we've got to get down to this 6 pound deal. So that's kind of the estimate deal, a guideline, a starting place. You know, you're obviously going to have to check, know what your bales weigh and how many cows you turn in there and how many days it lasted, to tweak that just a little bit. You might have to go up or down just a little bit in time that you do that. So in my situation, what I did is I had my cows out in the pasture, had my hay feeders, my round bale feeders in the lot. And I would show up, obviously I work till 5 o'clock every day. So by the time I got to those little cows, it was dark every day. And they'd be waiting on me right there at that gate, and I'd go open that gate. And here they take off in a dead run up to those hay feeders. I had 2 feeders in there, that's how many it took for me. Because obviously these cows, they've all got to be able to get to this hay at the same time. Because they're not going to be in there long enough to be fighting for it. So they've got to have their chance. And obviously it was dark, so I'd go sit in a pickup for 45 minutes and let them have their hay time, I called it. And at that point, I was, and again, this wasn't but about 30 cows, and I was carrying 5-gallon buckets of feed. My troughs were back out the gate, out of the lot in the pasture. So I would carry these buckets of feed over there to these troughs and pour that feed in those troughs. When those cows heard that, here they come running because they wanted to feed. So I didn't have any problem getting those cows away from that hay. Never once did I have to go drive them out. They was going to that feed. So at that point, they got to the feed in the trough. I shut the gate, went home. We went back and did it again tomorrow. So that was kind of my story. I got along real good with that deal. It takes some time to do it, but it worked out pretty good. And I was able to hang on to my cows from the drought of 2011. Some precautions to think about when you do that. Pretty important that you feed these cows at the same time every day. Stay away from any digestive problems or anything like that. We need to feed that hay first to make sure they consume that hay when we put it in that deal. In my situation, I don't think that would have made any difference other than made them harder to get away from the hay, because the amount of hay and feed I was feeding them was way less than what they wanted. So total pounds consumed per day is going to be less than what they're accustomed to. That's what I just said. Here's the thing right here, guys. Your fences better be pretty good, because these are not going to be happy cows. They're not going to be full. They're going to be gaunt and drawed up, and they're not going to be the cows that you're used to seeing when they're getting all the hay that they want. But you can do this and maintain their weight that they have. They're going to be hungry. When you first start this deal, guys, they might eat the bark off the trees. So they're not what you'd call happy cows. They're not going to make any TV commercials. Another thing with doing this deal, no more foraging we're putting in them. Be concerned with some problems like acidosis, bloat, founder, and those type of things. So, and it's going to require more labor. It's going to require more time and more management skills. I told my producers this year that there was not anything I could tell them that wasn't going to require more labor and more management, as far as helping them get through this deal. So with that said, Brian, that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Well, it's a good story, and you gave a lot of good advice there. I'm gonna kind of throw a question at you to kind of expand upon what you've talked so far, and that was on the concentrate portions, and maybe reiterate what you did there. Did you feed once a day or twice a day? I know you talked about feeding at the same time, every day, but what was kind of your game plan there?
Well, for me to get through that deal, I fed once a day. Obviously, working like most of my producers in this county, I work a job, this job right here. So I would get home about 5 o'clock every day, change clothes, and that's where we went. Funny thing is, I had an eighth grader son that had a couple of show calves, and his facility also got taken out by the tornado. And of course, I had a neighbor, or one of my clientele, that had a place. He volunteered to take his show calves out. So at that point, that's the first time he had ever worked those show calves without me. And I said, son, I've got to dump you off out here at these calves. And I said, I'll pick you up when the 45 minutes is over. So that's kind of the deal there. Did I get to the end of your question there, Brian?
Yeah, you did great. There is another question in the chat line, I think leads right into what we talked about there. And Dr. Lawman's asking about founder. Did you experience any founder?
I did not.
Maybe address that issue for him.
I did not experience any founder in my situation there. And gosh, I'm having a hard time remembering exactly what the concentrates were that I used, but DDG was obviously one of them. I was using that for my protein source, and I want to say corn gluten was the other one, but I'm not just real sure with that. Most of these programs are using whole corn and a protein source, which I'm sure Dave will get into next week. But best of my memory, it's been 11 years ago. I think it was DDG and corn gluten is what I was using.
And these are kind of unique times. We talk about things of feeding in normal conditions. These are definitely not normal conditions. And so, what tools did you use to help you kind of, fine tune how you were feeding your cattle? I'm kind of leading you into maybe the calculator program there a little bit. But,
absolutely. And that's exactly what I used. We put that deal in there, and of course, didn't have much hay, but I did have a forage test on it. Want to practice what we preach on that deal. So I had the forage test, so we knew what we was getting with that 6 pounds, and it wasn't much. It wasn't much. So basically, all their nutrients had to come from the concentrates. Using a calculator program to go in there and figure out how much of that we need to feed and those type of things. My time in extension, I've become the one that is my go-to thing when we're figuring rations or what these cows need. And be honest with you, I've been on it so much this year, I'm about tired of it.
I hear you. So I'm going to leave with this last question, and then maybe there's more coming for us, but we're going to try and allocate our own time here to get to the other speakers. But I always learn from my mistakes, I guess, Harold. And so what was one thing you learned during this drought feeding scenario that maybe you can give some recommendations to others that might experience, the same kind of operation that you were explaining there?
Well, for me, everything was pretty much positive for me in that situation. I didn't experience any problems whatsoever. The round bale feeders and the troughs is things that I already had there. And being a small producer, it would probably be pretty easy for somebody to say that I want to put all my cows together, so I just got to do that 45 minutes one time. Kind of deal. And in my case, they were all dry cows at that time. So I didn't have any wet cows I needed to separate out or anything like that. So again, all positive for me. We got through that deal, flying colors, and I became a believer in the limit feeding concentrates through that deal. And that's something, that we kind of, as extension personnel, practice what you preach, and it's kind it became a whole lot easier for me to promote that program after I did it.
Yeah, I agree with you. You know, my background picture shows a cow and a calf, you know, and I've got 2 other cows in my background. Those are the dry cows where I weaned early. So I couldn't sell my daughter's favorite show cow, but but what I was trying to do was have a pasture full of the same kind of cattle in the same production phase. And so that's part of it too, and how you use the calculator program to make sure you're feeding them what they need. So I'm going to end on that note, Rosalind, and that way we can let the other speakers go. And if we can come back later, we'll sure try and answer more questions. But thank you, Harold. Great job.
Absolutely.
Brian.
Thank you. Thank you, Harold. Sounds like it was a character building experience for your son. Your discussion of those small vales remind me of the character building experiences of my youth being tossed around in the back of a pickup, maybe by my dad or my sister. So with that, we're going to do this next one a little bit different. I'm going to show the slides here, and while I get those pulled up, I want to introduce one of our other area livestock specialists, Marty New, and they are coming to us live from Comanche County today. So Marty, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you while I get these slides pulled up for you.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Biggs. With me today is Josh and Wes Sullivan with Sullivan Farms in Lawton. They run right at 450, I guess, mama cows and some stockers as well. And then they also farm roughly 3,500 acres of farm ground. Basically, pretty much you guys plant about everything, I guess. And they're about the premier hay guys for this area. And I consider them at the forefront of production agriculture. They really stay on top of everything and run a really good operation. But what we kind of wanted to visit with you today about was this year, particularly Southwest Oklahoma, we've been as dry and through a drought similar to 2011. And the issue we had, and Josh called Trevor and myself in late August, I guess, and a lot of our cotton in Southwest Oklahoma was being disastered out. And Josh was asking questions about different opportunities or things that we could do with this failed cotton, and visiting with Dr. Lawman as well. We kind of put some stuff together, and Josh and Wes kind of did some experimenting on their own, I guess you could say. And we just kind of wanted to share a little bit of that with you today. So we'll kind of go through the slides and then kind of let Josh and Wes add to it as we go. So go ahead, Dr. Biggs. One of the things, this picture here just kind of shows you what a lot of the cotton fields in Southwest Oklahoma look like, and can kind of tell you why they were disastered out. 2 of the things we started talking about was if this was something we could actually graze, and what type of forage would be available grazing this area. And then the opportunity of also, if we rolled this up into hay or in round bales, to kind of see what kind of a or dry matter source or hay source this would have, just due to the limited supply that is across the state this year. Next, please. So these are additionally 2 fields. I think these were both in Jackson County. The one on the top, that's a field that had been shredded after it was disastered out. The thing I'd kind of like to point out is still the available green forage that is there. And after a few showers, there was additional green that did pop up. And the one on the lower right was a field that was also disastered out, but just kind of show you the available forage that we were trying to utilize in our in any type of operation here in the area. So Josh and Wes had 2 areas to where they decided they turned their cows in. The 2 pictures on the left-hand side, those pictures were taken October 25th, and the 2 on the right were the same fields on November 18th. So as you can see how those cattle, graze those areas. The thing we also noticed is how they really cleaned up the fence rows really cleaned up the areas on the perimeter of these pastures. And these cattle, we were just visiting, they also at periods of time allowed them access to 80 acres of grass. And they predominantly, they spend the majority of their time on the cotton grazing that area. And it's kind of hard to tell from these pictures, but these cows were in very good condition, still are in very good condition. And you can really see how they've utilized those fields and those plants throughout that 3-month or 3-week time period. So the other thing they also did, and this has been really interesting and kind of amazing to me. They rolled some of this up in round bales. I'll kind of let them explain the process. But here's how these bales looked. They looked excellent. The analysis that was done, they tested right at 13% protein. The lab Josh had used, we were just going over those results. They showed a TDN value of 54. So a very good source of protein and energy. They were also telling me these bales will weigh close to 2,000 or a little bit over 2,000 pounds. So very heavy, very dense bales. But as you can see in that analysis, the moisture content was kind of really similar to what we see on all of our other forages. So here's a video that Wes put together. I think it kind of defines the whole program. And since we've all talked, I know some of the places they've put out, they're utilizing these round bales of cotton, and it's amazing to watch the cows eat them and how well conditioned they are in and how they go clear. They can eat this entire bale and they'll just leave a small patch of white when it's done. So I'll kind of let the video play and you can kind of see what he's explaining.
Just put out a bale of cotton. First I put out a bale of alfalfa and a bale of grass. And you can see they're all coming over here to the cotton bale that I just put out last.
So just kind of give every background and now I'll kind of let Josh and Wes kind of fill you in, kind of what they've seen and what the experience they've had and how they actually put the cotton in the round bales and how they're utilizing it and how they're feeding it in their system. So Josh and Wes.
Well, as far as how we got to this point of doing it, everybody knows that we've had a shortage of hay in our area, and you know, I was raised think outside the box. And I think the older we get, I think the more we don't think outside the box as much as we should. But regardless, farmers and ranchers are resilient people, and we got to keep pushing forward because this is not only a way of life, but it's an investment you have. And we all know that after one of these droughts, if you was to sell 20 cows to replace it with a price increase, you're going to be maybe replacing it with 10. So you've got to look at that in the future. But as far as how we kind of started doing this, I talked to Marty, I talked to some nutritionists, ended up talking with a doctor at Texas A&M, and they did a study back in 2011. And they said they did get some grazing cotton that averaged around 14% protein. And as I was running a disc through some of this stuff, trying to get it destroyed out to proceed further, I have come across this situation before where I continue to have an argument with God about how can I survive this winter with no feed, and here I am plowing my feet up. And I kept getting told to try to swath and bale it. Of course, swathing cotton stalks with a sickle machine is going to be you think it's practically impossible. Typically we run disc heads over here on our self-propelled machines, but I do have a draper header. And those cotton stalks, when they're green for the majority of this cotton was no taller than knee high, but did have quite a few bolls on it, but they were down low, so the stripper couldn't get it. But those green stalks cut real, they're just like little saplings. They cut real easy. There were no problem. I did leave them tall enough where it won't be a puncture issue for plowing. We did have to leave it lay a lot because as you can see in those pictures, there's a lot of green and there's a lot of green bolls you're not seeing. It's on those plants that have not opened yet. When we did lay it down, those green bolls did go ahead and open some, which let them dry out. I was considered about a mold issue with the green. So I think they're at the end of middle of September there, we were still in the 100-degree days there for about 2 weeks. That helped a lot. And we let most of that hay lay for 14, 18 days before we baled it. We did try baling some of it with case on it to see if we could preserve some of the leaves and see if it mattered. And then we started baling it in the heat of the day where we lost a lot of those leaves got pulverized. And I don't think we lost any nutritional value either way, other than the fact that the drier hay, I was less concerned about it molding for what little bit of moisture it may or may not have had. Cows eat it great. Mr. Stevens said they don't have a lot of hay processors down in that area. People don't feed with vertical mixers, stuff like that. My dad insists on putting his hay out free choice with his cotton bales. I use a hay processor and I do have some high nitrate millet hay that I am windrowing out with my hay processor, 1 bale of that to 2 bales of cotton on top to dilute that down where it's not toxic to it. They'll eat the whole thing. And I don't see any difference in putting it through the hay processor over feeding it free choice, other than the fact that I'm able to utilize my high nitrate hay and stretch it out a little bit farther. But by the time the cattle get through eating what hay they got, like Marty said, there's a small pile of sticks there maybe, and then maybe a little bit of cotton that they did smash in the dirt while they was eating on it. But other than that, the loss is very, very minimal.
So, Wes, when you film the video, do you see that consistently when you put out hay each time they come to the cotton first, or?
Yes, pretty much. Most of the time it seems as though they prefer the cotton hay. Normally you drive by and they really spend a lot of time at these bales. We were concerned about a lot of waste with the stalks, of course, thinking we may have to, go in with a brush hog and shred them afterward where we put out bales or whatever. So we really haven't been putting them in feeders. We've been just kind of spreading them out randomly in the pasture where we won't have to deal with it much. But there's really, I did have a picture on there where they had, after I'd set a bale out with 2 other bales of grass and alfalfa, after I'd set it out 3 days, and there's really not much waste at all. I still like shredding it out or spreading it out in different areas because everybody knows it's not a whole lot of fun going and spreading manure piles or hay piles or whatever. But they really, really do spend a lot of time at it and clean it up very well.
So with the grazing the standing cotton or utilizing the round bales, how do you guys feel the cows have performed? Have they performed to your expectations, exceeded, or didn't?
They have maintained very well as far as condition wise. There's no condition loss. If anything, some of these cattle, I'd be at times when that cotton, they get into a really, really heavy patch or you're feeding them a lot, or they're grazing a lot of that stuff, they do get a little loose, like on wheat pasture. And so I was getting to the point, almost being a little bit concerned, maybe I should set some wheat straw that I had baled out, but they, as far as getting scoured or bloating or having any loss, we haven't had anything over that.
I'd have to say they exceeded to what I was expecting, because who would have everybody that's been around cotton stalks know what the stalks get like. I mean, they tear up our tires and everything else because they're like a little tree. And I'm amazed at how they have performed on it versus what we were expecting.
So with that, so you guys were telling me you've put up about 600 bales of this cotton and have starting to utilize it in your operation. Josh, you also mentioned you're feeding it to some calves.
Yes.
Kind of explain how you're using it and feeding out your weaned calf crop.
Well, with, Mr. Stephens brought up, the price of feed, everything's expensive. You're trying to feed the concentrate. What's the cheapest way? And, labor is really your biggest intense here because you're trying to utilize every bit you can without waste, rather than continuously making multiple trips to the field back and forth. I'm putting out Sweet Pro tubs, which is satisfying their energy and their protein needs on all of my pastures, and my stocker cattle that I just have on dry grass right now. Before I turn on some wheat pasture, fortunately going to have. I'm feeding them the Sweet Pro tubs along with some good native grass that I cut, and then I also windrow up with my hay processor that cotton, and those cattle stay on the cotton bale 90% of the time.
Okay.
I'm gonna say one of the benefits as well. Everybody knows when you're just go in and shred cotton stalks or whatever, it's all, even if it got disastered, it's going to have cotton seed, quite a bit of cotton still there that's you're going to be getting on the ground, and you're going to be fighting sprout from that next year that is going to be hard to control whenever you plant your new cotton crop, because it's going to be in between the rows. And baling this stuff up, it gets rid of a whole lot of that. And grazing it, of course, they're going to clean majority of that up. Even if it falls on the ground, they're going to pick up most of that cotton seed and the lint. And we didn't know how they'd eat the plant in general on the grazing, but they really ate majority of the plant, most of the leaves. There's really not much left.
Yeah. That was one thing Dr. Lawman and I had talked about, was what was the palatability of, these plants, because of the kind of plant a cotton plant is. So that's been real interesting, but also I find it interesting is how they cleaned up the borders. And I'm sure that's an added benefit of it as well.
Well, and it is, and I think they probably started on the borders. They ate it so hard due to they don't have experience with cotton, of course. So it was an adjustment getting to where they would actually be able to graze the cotton until they got adjustment to that.
Yeah. So your plans for it, are you going to try to utilize it throughout the winter as much as you can, or just kind of see how it carries itself and how the cows do, or
Just continue on. Like I said, we feed 2/3, most of it, we're feeding 2/3 of the cotton and then 1/3 of grass hay or a supplement of hay grazer or something that we did get to put up. So we've got enough hay now to last plumb through the end of April the end of March was what we've got for cotton right now, which is going to stretch our hay out. The problem, my biggest concern is going to be a snowstorm or ice storm where you're having to really double up on feeding a lot of hay. And that's going to be a problem for everybody in the state, because those cattle really need a lot of energy during that cold time to keep making milk. And everybody's going to be calving here. I've already calved some of my fall calves are all done. So.
Well, and you might explain, like we were talking earlier, the fun it is of trying to take the wrap off of these bales.
Yeah. Yeah, the wrap's not fun. You have to take it off the way the stalks are laying. Otherwise, it's like pulling your net wrap through a barbed wire fence.
Yeah, it doesn't work very well.
Yeah. So I'd kind of open it up to any questions that you may have for Josh and Wes. I tell you, everyone, it's been a learning experience for me, but it's been a very fun project to kind of watch. I drive by a lot of their pastures every day, and it's really you can see when they put those bales out, and those cows are just look like they're eating a snowstorm, really. big pile of snow is what it kind of looks like, but they take it all the way to the ground. So any questions anyone may have?
We did have a question. Oh, we had a couple questions. Marty, can you, I think we mentioned on the analysis of those bales, it was the shot of the bales in the PowerPoint, but can you give us that info again on the crude protein and the TDN on those bales?
Yeah, the protein value was 13%. And that was from the OSU lab. We still haven't got the energy value from that, but Josh did, he sent a sample off himself and it come back right at 54 TDN. So a very good source. Their lab tested it at 12% protein, so real consistent to what we were seeing. So.
Just for perspective's sakes, Marty, the gestating cow on average is going to require somewhere in that range of about 54 TDN and a diet that's around 8% protein. So should be adequate for that gestating cow and have extra protein.
Well, and the thing I've noticed where they're feeding this is the hair coat of these cows. I mean, they're not slick, but you can sure tell they're in good shape. Their hair is, I mean, they have pretty hair coats. I mean, you can sure tell the benefit that they're getting from that cotton seed as well.
Dr. Biggs, I'm going to ask Dr. Beck to maybe comment on the nitrate question, but I thought your all's approach to diluting the high nitrate hay was outstanding. I mean, that's some system like that is how we'd like to encourage most people to utilize their high nitrate forage, just to blend it in like that. I mean, that's a great technique to utilize that hay and not have to set it off in the road ditch or burn it or something. But very interesting. Dr. Beck, do you have any thoughts on the nitrate accumulation? And Dr. Biggs, maybe I'm getting ahead of you here, but
No, I'd rather punt that to Dr. Beck, to be quite honest with you, because I don't have a good answer for us. It's certainly not one that we generally worry about. We do worry about gossypol toxicity, of course, in cotton, and so that would be something we would want to kind of keep tabs on. But Dr. Beck, what do you think about the nitrates?
Well, so some of our dicot type weeds can accumulate nitrates like pigweed and some of those. So it's wouldn't be unheard of, but it's not a normal forage crop. So we don't have a lot of information on nitrate accumulation in these cotton crops. And it probably goes along with everything else, you know, how much fertilizer is put out, soil types and those types of issues. I would say our best indicator of the nitrate accumulation in the cotton they've been feeding, if they're using it to dilute the high nitrate other hay, then we probably see some dead cows. So my initial guess is that it's probably not a major concern in cotton, and that'd be certain we could certainly get some samples, and it'd be interesting to look at just to see what it's in those.
Absolutely. When in doubt, of course, always test that hay, right? And we can't push that enough from a variety of levels. Dr. Lohman, you had a question, I think, that we were thinking about. We mentioned the kind of the loose manure on feeding those bales, but gentlemen, what about those when you had them graze in the pasture? What did you see there?
The manure really didn't change because I guess we've been blessed with some rain in southwest Oklahoma. So, and we were warm there the end of September after we got some of those rains. We've stayed above average, somewhat on warmth for most days, and we've got a lot of green winter grass coming up that the cattle are licking on as well. So what I really expect them to go out and eat the dry grass and maybe firm up a little bit, they've actually probably stayed the same, if not gotten a little bit looser on that because of that green grass they're eating on.
Excellent. I was just thinking if they were consuming quite a bit of seed, which Obviously, there's not going to be as much seed as normal out there, but that extra fat is going to result many times in a looser stool. Sounds like they're on pretty good quality diet regardless. And so, yeah, that maybe not be surprising. And again, they may not be getting that much fat,
I don't know.
just
I don't
enough
know.
to slick their hair coat.
I don't know if he spoke much on it earlier, but if anybody does do it where they are laying it down to pick it up for hay, we used a draper header to where we didn't have to rake it or anything. That way we could still, we're getting 25 feet in a one row versus try to do, 15 foot at a time, because there would be no way to rake it. It would destroy your rakes with the stalks that you left. And but be prepared to, it does take it 2 to 3 weeks to cure out, because you are, he mentioned swathing it down, and it still had some, quite a few green bowls that were not opened. And everybody knows whenever you spray cotton to open the bowls and everything, it does take a while for them to pop open and then cure out as well inside. So it does take quite some time for it to dry out enough where you can bale it to get it right, to where you don't have to fight a mold issue or something else.
All right. We did have a question on liquid feed versus tubs. Dr. Lawman, I'm going to save that one till next week, if that's okay, with our concentrated feed discussion next week. So I also want to reiterate a comment we have in the chat of really appreciate all our presenters today and our educators joining us, specialists joining us from a variety of perspectives, really across the state, and the ingenuity of Oklahoma producers to get through the drought, because it's here, and we'll continue to say our prayers that we get some rain, or we take any moisture, I suppose. Even the snow in the back of Harold's background, I would take right now. So with that, Dr. Lawman is on tap next week to talk to us about other feeding options, particularly concentrates, and looking forward to that. We do also want to mention, of course, Trevor Vaughn and his family, and saying a few prayers for them as they welcomed very early, unfortunately, their twins. And so keep them in your prayers as you continue on this week, and because they've got a long road to take as those girls continue to fight in the NICU. So with that, Dr. Lawman, Dr. Beck, anything else?
No, thank you so much. That was really good stuff coming from out there in the country. Josh and Wes, thank you so much. Harold, thank you. As I agree with Kevin, who says great to see the innovation of Cowboys. Thanks so much.
All right. As a final reminder, as you exit out today, you should have a feedback survey that will pop up there. Please take a moment, and it won't take you very long. It is anonymous. We don't know you if you like it or you don't. We can't tie that to you. And so, but we do want you to be honest with us on how these are working for you and what you'd like to see next on the Ranchers Thursday Lunchtime Series. So we will see you next week, same time and same place. And we will again thank our presenters today. We appreciate it very, very much.